Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Barry Asin, president of SIA. I'm delighted to be here in another in our series of In Discussion With conversations where we're talking to leaders in and around the workforce solutions and staffing ecosystem. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Przemek Berendt, who is the CEO of Talent Alpha. Prez is coming to us from their headquarters in Krakow, Poland. Prez, really delighted to have you with us today.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I'm excited. I was looking at your background, and I think you've got a real interesting perspective to lend to the conversation about what the future of talent is going to look like, and the future of the human cloud, which we'll get into. For those of you who haven't seen his bio, Prez founded Talent Alpha just in 2018. They've made lots of progress since then. He was previously with Luxoft, which is a leading international IT services and software firm. He was global marketing VP and was there from 2011 to 2018. In a moment, Prez, I'm going to ask you what clicked and got you to go off and found your own company. What we've seen about Talent Alpha. You've got this mission around building a future of work platform and really focused in on the IT world, which makes sense given your background. The company's won lots of awards. They've got a number of significant clients, and I think there's you sort of in many ways represent a lot of the innovators and the entrepreneurs in the space who are getting involved in this world. And what was it, Prez, that led you to leave Luxoft and to found Talent Alpha?
There were a couple of things. One of them was the problem that the market has been experiencing at that time and continues to experience and will experience, which is the growing issue of the tech talent gap. One of my jobs back at Luxoft was building the employer brand of the company, so we could actually build the talent pipeline. And I saw how increasingly difficult it was. At the same time, the entire IT services industry saw growing demand. And the key insight that kind of got me into thinking about a different model in which talent could be connected with opportunity. And that opportunity being a project or a job to be done on typically a large enterprise site. And the key insight on which we've built the business was the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of small IT services organizations out there in the world. We estimate roughly 300,000 around the globe and over 25,000 over here in Central and Eastern Europe, where the wealth of talent is sitting. A lot of people who are actually very qualified to deliver software services in a very professional way. But for many reasons, they're actually excluded from the enterprise market. So this was kind of the key insight that we could actually invert and challenge some of the core IT services players by offering a different way of tapping into that talent pool.
Very interesting. And so, we spend a lot of time talking with large organizations about, tapping into contingent workers. And pretty much that's usually about finding the right individual for the right job. What are the challenges that organizations have? You sort of alluded to it a little bit around, connecting with small organizations as opposed to individual workers.
Well, bringing an individual on board, whether it's a full-time talent or a gig worker, always comes to vetting that talent and taking them through the entire recruitment process, right? And also a number of legal obstacles and more are being introduced in the space of the gig work. However, what we do, we actually tap into companies that specialize in providing those services. And we've built a gateway that allows these organizations through a single contract with Talent Alpha to transact with this growing ecosystem of the companies. So today in our ecosystem, we have over 460 companies across 30 different countries that gives us access to a growing talent pool of over 25,000 individuals, right? So with a single contract, the client gets kind of a meta vendor, let's call it this way, that allows them to very dynamically tap into the talent pool. This is one of the benefits. The second one is that instead of actually hiring individuals, this model also allows you to hire entire teams on demand, right? And therefore, you actually bypass a big part of the so-called time to productivity, right? Where you need to form the team and make the team actually performing on a high level. In our model, because we are tapping into existing organizations, existing teams, teams that know how to work together, they have a common culture, they have an existing process, you bypass the entire process of forming, norming, storming, and performing when it comes to build out of a team.
Very, very interesting. So, so I think we're going to come back to some of that, because that's a different model. I think it seems sort of a hybrid between a typical, going with a solutions organization and a typical contingent work model. What, obviously before you started Talent Alpha, and certainly at Talent Alpha now, you've seen a lot of the changes in the IT market. And we know that just finding talent is a huge challenge. What are some of the other challenges that you guys see out there that around this really valuable IT talent?
Well, one of them is the growing demand, right? The so-called tech talent gap was estimated at roughly 9 million vacancies prior COVID. As COVID accelerated a lot of the digital transformation projects, everyone is basically looking for that talent. So the demand is skyrocketing. There is research coming from Microsoft that was published last year when they forecast that by 2025, there will be 160 million additional IT jobs on the market, right? And whereas the supply is growing only so steadily, roughly 3 to 5% a year, with the new graduates entering the market, the demand suddenly skyrocketed, right? And that gap is causing a certain friction on the market. When there is a huge demand and a limited supply, this is actually driving a lot of interesting actions on both sides of that equation. On one hand, the customers, the demand side, they are looking into new ways of opening new talent pools. There are so-called the issue of hiring for full time within the 30-mile radius from the HQ is no longer an option, right? We see companies from Los Angeles or Silicon Valley recruiting directly over here in Poland, paying actually US salaries to those Polish engineers, right? Something that prior COVID has not been seen before. At the same time, we see talent being more open to those agile models, whereas back in the past, many people were more concerned about stability of the job, not so much about the type of work. Now we see that shifting as well. What the talent is looking for is actually ability to apply their skills at the most interesting job, right? And these opportunities that are opening for them around the globe actually changes the entire dynamics of the market.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we've definitely seen that, and and have seen a number of different examples of how the pandemic has sort of flipped a little light switch in a lot of people's minds about work and workers. Tell me more about this idea of like how work from home, because that was really sort of frowned upon in a lot of big organizations, but we saw a big flip in that. What are the risks and challenges with a remote workforce when maybe, or for organizations that were really used to having them badged and secured inside their building in the past?
Well, definitely security and compliance for large organizations is part of the issue that needs to be controlled, right? The fact you don't see that individual working, especially when it comes to some core projects, raises some of those security controls. Culture, I think, is a big challenge, right? For many organizations who had the in-office culture, that transition we see has been difficult. Luckily, IT departments, they've been experimenting with, a couple of days of work from home prior to that. So many organizations had at least some footprint on how to execute that strategy. But as we spent in that mode, the past 18 months or so, there are new issues that are emerging, right? One of them is the mental health of those workers, right? How can companies make sure that someone who's spending their entire time at home is not burning out? How can you detect it and protect it, maintaining the team cohesion and actually making sure that the company's culture is being translated in a way to these individuals? Onboarding new employees also is a totally new story, right? Like, how do you work with someone who's never seen their team in their real life, right? Or never put their foot in their office? There are a number of new challenges that kind of caught us off guard in this new reality.
And I'm guessing, are you at Talent Alpha? Are you guys all working remote, or are you coming into the office, or how are you guys handling that?
We went to remote work on the day one that the lockdown was announced over here in Poland, and we switched to the remote first meeting. So, and as the restrictions started easing up over here, we started opening up the office very slowly, allowing people to come back if they wanted. But the process that we built and the culture we are building is a remote first, right? So even if we are having a meeting in the office and I'm sitting opposite to some of my colleagues, we always do it on Teams, right? So the others who are part of that call or would like to see that call at some other time, because this is also a new kind of invention that a lot of that work is now happening asynchronously, can join and watch that.
Yeah, so recording all of those meetings, and so anybody can catch it anytime they want. Very interesting. I know you also have been, and we've been doing a lot of research over time on this this idea of total talent acquisition, of total talent, of getting organizations to think more broadly about all the different forms of talent in their organization. I'm just curious your thoughts about how that's going to develop. I mean, we've done some research that, and last looked at this a year or two ago, and the progress is there's a lot of interest in this idea of a more integrated thinking between contingent workers and traditional workers. But there hasn't been a lot of progress in large organizations. There have been a lot of barriers. What are you guys seeing about that? And how do you think talent strategy is going to evolve, particularly in technology-based organizations?
What we used to see was kind of this split between full-time workers, outsourced workers, and some of the contingent. And prior to the pandemic, I would say contingent workforce, especially the gig workforce, was more of a novelty rather than a standard. Where I believe it's heading is that the organizations will have to change their mindset, and instead of thinking of the types of different workers they might have in their total workforce, rather to think on whether they have the right skills to get the job done, right? Because I think that actually going forward, especially in the IT market, having a full-time worker would be a luxury very few will be able to afford, right? And as companies would be looking to deliver on their digital strategies, right, they'll have to get more creative and actually more adapted to those new ways, right? So, if I have an option to spend 90 or 120 days recruiting an IT professional that I know will stay with me on average 18 to 24 months, maybe I'm better off actually tapping in some of those contingent gig human cloud workers to get that job done, right? And I think companies will have to mature their thinking in that regard to adapt to this new reality.
Right. So you just mentioned the term human cloud, and I know we've done we've done research in this area, been doing lots of thinking about that and talking to lots of organizations. So, gig workers, human cloud, how do you define this concept of human cloud as opposed to maybe more traditional ways organizations are finding talent?
Well, to me, human cloud is a set of technologies and work intermediation models on how talent can be connected with the job to be done, right? And the best analogy I think we can find to that is actually the real cloud, right? In the IT world and servers, right? That allows you to tap into a certain capability somewhere else. You don't really know where physically that capability resides, but you know that certain characteristics of that capability is guaranteed to you and deliver on time, right, when you need it. And you also know upfront, the cost, and you know that the job will be performed. The beauty of the real cloud, the IT cloud, is that you can actually easily scale up and down on that capability going forward. And I fundamentally believe that this is where the enterprise will be heading, right? That will be building these ecosystems that across the different pockets of talent will allow you to actually in a very agile and nimble way, build those strategies, right? If you have a project that you need to critically deliver over the next 9 months, perhaps that's the time where you are feeling comfortable actually tapping into one of the human cloud models and bringing those workers in to get the job done. But maybe you have some core initiative, right? Building a core system of the enterprise where you want to retain that knowledge within the organization. Then perhaps, you are better off with trying to find the full-time talent. And a human cloud with the models that are emerging, and including the one that we are promoting, which we call the Enterprise Gateway Marketplace, allow you to start achieving that. What I mean by that is you can actually tap into those talent pools that prior to that were not on the radar of many of these companies.
Yeah. And, we obviously talk to lots of people running large enterprise contingent workforce programs, and I can see the skeptical ones in among those, in large organizations, thinking about risk and thinking about things like security and the like. How do you see that is likely to evolve? Because that's certainly what we hear first from organizations is they're going like, well, that's great, but how do I know these people are real people, and is my data safe? All those sorts of things. Exactly the same issues, right, that we have with the internet overall, I guess, right? With data in the cloud.
Well, this very much the same questions were asked about 2 decades ago when the IT outsourcing really started, right? Trusting to take part of your core operations and giving it to a vendor. The same questions emerge, like how do we know the data is safe? How do we know that the people that we are told are working on that are real people? And the industry worked out a number of ways of dealing with that, including building isolated infrastructures or dedicated service delivery centers and putting security controls. I believe that the mature platforms will actually evolve in that way as well, right? That, for example, that as you will be bringing a team to work for you, therefore, by default, would be a reflective IT infrastructure created with a VPN dedicated server, so you know that the data is secured, including potentially, some data masking protocols if you're working with sensitive data. So I think there are a lot of practices that we can take from the previous wave of that transformation that happened when companies started outsourcing to outside vendors.
Right, and so I guess that would be like if I was asking, what are best practices in accessing cloud-based talent. It sounds like that which you just described is one of them. Are there other best practices that you see sophisticated organizations using to try to access this talent?
So that, what I just described, I would qualify it as more as IT infrastructure / legal framework. I think there are a number of other components. One is, in which model are you actually accessing that talent, right? And again, there are a number of flavors out there. Kind of the pure play, I would say, freelance model where you're hiring an individual consultant on the hourly basis somewhere from the cloud. This model, as we know, comes with the issue of vetting that talent, and really the question is, do these people really exist, and are who they are? We solve it in a different way because we connect companies, right? On the demand and supply side, we are dealing with businesses, and there are workers who are working in those businesses that supply those services. And by the nature of the underlying business model, again, we call it the enterprise gateway because we, with a single contract with the client, we give them access to this growing ecosystem of companies. But by the very nature of the underlying business model, we actually solve a number of these issues. We know these people are hired on a contract or a legal contract, so they are actually an employee of that business. We know that they've been vetted because they've worked in that organization for a period of time. We also know who they are working with in the team, right? So then when we dispatch the entire team, we actually understand their history prior to that as well.
Right. Okay. And so that, I think that sort of gets it. Are there other things that you would say are best practices in terms of what organizations do when they try to get, human cloud in general, or are there common mistakes that you've seen clients make that sort of derails their efforts around this?
I think we are in the still very early days of the human cloud approach adoption. We see some of the most progressive organizations building programs and setting aside innovation teams or specific roles that will deal with that issue. So someone who is head of future of work or head of future skills type of role, where they are trying to wrap their mind around on how this should work. So I think it's too early to kind of talk about best practices or the typical pitfalls. I can speak to the typical challenges that we see, right? Which is, organizations often think about this human cloud talent in the categories of the permanent talent, right? So they take their time in vetting that and taking them through the classic recruitment process, right? They still have this mentality of hiring for a role rather than hiring for the job. And I think this is the core transformation or the transition that needs to happen in their minds, right? Because in a human cloud, a given talent, given capability might be available at this point in time, right? But if you drag your feet, for 2, 4, 6 weeks to decide if you want to tap into this capability, it will go elsewhere, right? And again, coming back to the core challenge, which is this gap between demand and supply of that talent, I think organizations need to really change their policies on how they think about tapping that, right? Mm-hmm. And therefore, human cloud vendors, they should be kind of this trust element, right? That guarantees that behind that there is a person that was validated, qualified, they exist, they are vetted, and we know their capabilities, and the vendor actually guarantees the delivery of the service.
Right. Well, we've certainly heard that a lot, is that, for large enterprise organizations, just not moving fast enough particularly for this hot IT talent. That's a huge challenge and, something important to address.
And I think this goes across many functions, right? So it's talent acquisition, it's HR, it's procurement, and it's also, IT or service delivery, right? And they all will have to really understand what the core of the issue is, and there is a solution, right? But in order to use that solution, they will have to adapt.
Right. Very good. Well, let's one of the things that we've seen is just an explosion of new technology being applied in the world of contingent work, and particularly a lot of organizations talking about using artificial intelligence and machine learning to do a better job of connecting work and workers. If you were to look out, I know you guys are doing some work in this area, just tell me where you see this all going and what are like the big innovations that are going to change things in terms of AI and machine learning and the like.
Well, I think that AI and machine learning will be augmenting humans to a large extent, really taking off the burden of some of the activities in the talent acquisition process, such as screening CVs and matching, the CV to the opportunity on a high level, or actually doing the screening call on behalf of the recruiter, right? By sending a number of activities of questionnaires to be completed, which is exactly what our platform is capable of doing. But fundamentally, this comes to the amount of data that the platform can connect, right? It can collect on these individuals, right? The better input we get into the process, and this applies both to the description of the opportunity, right? But also to the data we collect about that talent that would be connected with it, then better outcome we would get. We already have working prototypes of algorithms that can calculate, we call it proximity to the dream candidate. So we were capable of building this digital image of the perfect person the organization needs. So think about it as a job description on steroids, right? Whereas in a classic job description, you would have probably 15 keywords that describe it. Typically a copy and paste, from the last time you were recruiting for that role. We took it to the extreme where we have a workflow to work out with our customers to build a very detailed digital representation of what that dream candidate is, including all of the required technical characteristics, but also a lot of the soft skills, such as cognitive traits, soft skills, as well as the personality traits. And that data set is that reference point to which we can then compare all of the talent available in the talent pipeline. And we are talking that's why we are talking about the all of the talent, because the algorithms we have are capable of finding that proximity between the employees you currently have on board, and a lot of that talent is actually hidden within your organization. You might not just be aware of that.
And Prez, when you're talking the talent you currently have on board, are you referring to contractors, staff aug workers, and full-time employees?
Well, the algorithm doesn't have to even distinguish that, right? What really matters is, matching the skills to the job to be done, right? So it's irrelevant, in fact, right? But that's what we see going forward, right? That it will be irrelevant, right? As long as you can find that match, someone who has the right skills to get the job done and it's available, then you're successful, right? Where I was heading with that is that, it applies to the existing talent pool. Again, contractors, full-time workers, gig workers you already might have in your system. Also your candidate pipeline and the broader human cloud, right? So we have algorithms that allow you to actually run that analytics across those different spectrums. It's still in R&D, right? But we have proven that AI can calculate, across thousands of data points, across thousands of profiles on who would be potentially the best fit to that particular job to be done.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And so, you can sort of imagine that being like, the analogy of how Netflix is telling you which show you should watch next based on your past experience. Is that, is that a decent way for people to think about it?
It's probably in a way. I think that recommendation engine is something that is coming next, right? Which is we have Barry on board, right? And many times managers think, oh my gosh, if I could only clone Barry, all of my problems would be gone, right? And in fact, what we are striving to do is to decode that talent genome, right? And build a digital model of Barry, so we can find similar individuals out there in the human cloud. What I also think AI would be capable of doing is to do something that only very skilled recruiters can do, which is a way to read between the lines, right? So even though in your profile it says, for example, JavaScript and React, right? An experienced IT recruiter would know that there are certain underlying technologies that you're likely to know, right? And well-trained AI models would be able to do that. And then even though something is not explicitly stated in your profile, they'll be able to do that match.
Right. So just get much more refined. One of the things that, when we started this discussion, you were talking about this idea of, what motivated you initially was this thought of, all the talent locked in these small organizations, small IT organizations that companies enterprise should be connecting with. And it got me thinking about like traditional VMS systems. So how does like the way you guys are thinking about that, how does that fit with, large enterprises that might have a VMS currently in place?
I would say we kind of invert that VMS model a bit, right? Because the way this works, the company has a list of vendors and then the vendor manager is managing the relationship with them, right? We invert it in a way that we come kind of as this first layer and we say, we would be serving you across this growing ecosystem, right? You don't have to onboard the 460 companies that are working with us today or the couple of thousands that we will have tomorrow. We guarantee you that, if they are part of our ecosystem and you want to tap into that research, the service would be rendered with a high quality. That is one. The second is, we actually invest very heavily in building our ability to understand the talent that is sitting in these organizations, right? VMS VMS suppliers operate still in the old world of matching to a role, right? I need a Java developer, here is 5 CVs. Whereas in our model, it comes down to the skill, again, and mapping it to the job to be done.
Very interesting. Okay. So what, if you start to look out into the future a bit, where do you think, where do you think this whole development of human cloud is going? If we were to look, 10 years from now or 5 years from now, I know that things are moving so fast.
Yeah. Well, we used to talk about mobile revolution and then big data revolution. Everything for us is a transformation, right? Our generation, because we were not born into this world, looks at all of that as a novelty. I think the generation that will be coming to the labor market, 10 years from now. I'm a father of 4, and 3 of them would be in the labor market 10 years from now. When I observe how they interact, how they learn, how they study, how they build relationships, a lot of the stuff that for us were transformative or revolutionary, for them that is just a given, right? And I think this will yield a lot of new models and behaviors that they're hard to predict, right? But what I would bet on is that it will be way more transactional, right? When we are starting our careers, if you jumped a job after 2 years, people thought that you are, a parachuter and a jumper, right? Right now, it's okay, right? I think going forward, you'll be more assigned to a project, right? I also think that people will be more interested in the growth opportunities and really applying their kind of strengths. And again, that human cloud should unlock it, right? If we have enough data, if we have enough people inventory it into those data models, we should be able to unlock these transactions to flow freely, which I think fundamentally will change the way the world operates in a way. Because, back in the days, if you were born in a small town, unless you were lucky or super hardworking, you would typically be kind of locked into that environment, right? And in the new and global economy and the human cloud that we are building, you might be born anywhere. As long as you're skilled, right? We will be able to connect you to a dream job, at Netflix, Google, or whomever the desired employer will be 10 years from now.
Yeah, you can see, and we can see how COVID and the pandemic has really accelerated the thinking on that, which I think is where we started this discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, it's unbelievable. When we started our journey, human cloud, I think, was a term that SIA carved, and it was a novelty, and we had to spend a lot of time explaining to people, and the concept of working with someone remotely was difficult. As we've gone through this super fast transition, those conversations are no longer required. Right? Like, people know that there is something big going on and they need to adapt.
Yeah. So just in closing, I know what are like the top things that you guys are working on right now? What's sort of the leading edge in terms of tech development for Talent Alpha?
We are investing a lot in the talent and opportunity match automatization, so recruitment process automation, right? Trying really to augment, and automate the processes that are happening within the platform. So how we actually facilitate that match. We see a lot of opportunity there for AI and machine learning. So we're heavily investing into that as well. But also the data collection, right? Like, how can we actually bring many of the sources of the data so we can build and feed these models with what we know about these specialists. So we have a number of features within the platform that allow us to parse the existing documents. We have features to identify and self-assess technical skills. We have features that allow us to measure certain psychometric soft skills and personality traits with scientifically proven models. And all of that creates that data set that then allows us to manipulate that data and then actually reduce the friction in this process to a large extent.
Well, very good. All right. Well, we're coming up. We've got a little bit of time left for questions, so we're going to open it up for questions in just a moment. But in the meantime, Prez Berendt, I just wanted to say thanks very much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Bye-bye now. And we'll take your questions in just a moment. Okay, we're back, and we'll now go to our questions and answers. We have a number of questions from folks out on the line, and we'll try to get to as many of these as we can. So, Prez, let's start. We had some questions here. Some specific questions, I guess, about Talent Alpha a little bit. Somebody was asking how much time does it take to find and match a specialist through your platform? Maybe if you can talk about what that's like.
Right. So at any given point in time, we have several thousands of profiles that are available kind of on demand, right? So it largely depends on the type of need that their organization might have. So the match is pretty much instant. Where I think what we should discuss, because this is where it gets interesting, and that's where our model comes superior, is how quickly these individuals can be then deployed to start their work, but also how quickly they are becoming productive. So, we've had cases where we had not only individuals, but entire teams starting to work on clients' projects with as little as 24 hours, but that was kind of on the extreme edge. Typically, it's anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks between the first time we receive an inquiry to the moment that actually the entire team can start getting on the job. So the way we like to think about it is that it's no longer about the time to hire or time to close the vacancy, but actually time to getting the job done. And this is where the Talent Alpha model comes superior, because again, tapping into the existing organization and existing team, that team becomes very productive very fast.
Yeah, got it there. So, all right, that's good. Now, you did mention that companies will need to adapt their thinking to this new reality of hybrid work. And do you want to talk a little bit about the key trends that you've seen so far with regard to that?
So definitely, one of them is that talent is now available anywhere, right? So anywhere and everywhere. So companies no longer kind of look for talent in their 30-mile radius from their office, and we see it on a daily basis where companies from example, from Silicon Valley start recruiting directly on the Central and European markets, something that before wasn't done that frequently. Also, what we observe is that kind of the velocity of the entire market sped up significantly. There's no longer companies no longer have the luxury, to take weeks and weeks of interviews to decide on hiring someone, because that talent is quickly becoming unavailable on the market. So they need to adapt their thinking, and we see some of the organizations doing that. Kind of on the large scale, we see organizations now becoming serious and strategic about the future of work or human cloud, where they are building specific parts of the organizations that are tasked to actually explore on how these models could be brought into the workforce. So that would be the top three that I would point.
Right, that's great. And you guys have done some research on this as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, we do research that on a regular basis, and every year we publish what we call the Future of Work report. There is one coming up in October, so I invite our audience to go to our website and register for that report. This is where we are bringing thought leaders, experts, executives from various industries to talk about these issues. So the report on the future of work that is coming up will talk about the A3 revolution, working from anywhere, any place, and at any time. And I invite you to check you out.
I'll just say that, I know at SIA, we're very interested in this as well. And, this whole trend, remote work is, the pandemic has really accelerated that trend for sure. Prez, we have another question here. And this one was around pain points. So if you're looking for talent on the human cloud, what specific pain points are you typically solving for? And what do you see as the challenges that organizations face as they move to more of a cloud-based, anywhere talent model?
Right, on the macro level, again, I think the key pain point that we solve is the tech talent gap, right? We are helping companies to execute on their digital strategies by allowing them to find individuals and teams and organizations in this ecosystem that we are growing that have the capabilities to help them deliver on these strategies. The typical problem that we see, kind of on the demand side of that equation, is that organizations often have quite a basic understanding of who they actually need to get the job done, right? They would typically have a job description that, in most of the cases was a copy and paste from the last time they were looking to staff that role. And in order to adopt the human cloud and be fast with it and efficient, right, you need to have kind of a next level understanding of what skills would be required to perform a given activity. We also help companies to speed up their time to market by actually helping them to deliver on these strategies faster instead of waiting for months, before that team can be built from full-time employees or individual freelancers. You get the right going with the team coming from the cloud, therefore shortening the time to market. And the last benefit or the pain point that we are trying to address is actually make these companies even more innovative. Because what we are capable of doing is, taking your business problem and introducing it not to only one group, right, but to a subset of our broader ecosystem, and therefore help you to come up with numerous solutions to a business problem you're trying to solve.
Right. Oh, very good. All right. Well, another question we got here. This seems to be an age-old one. People asking about co-employment. And, the question was, how do organizations manage a human cloud and avoid co-employment legal issues?
So definitely, in jurisdictions where these regulations are coming into power, this is becoming a very important problem. We, in a way, are not part of that because, again, in the Talent Alpha model, we are a B2B2B platform. So effectively, we connect two companies. Every individual who is then assigned to work on a given project statement of work is a full-time hire of the company that we are bringing into our ecosystem. So that problem doesn't apply to us. However, the way we see organizations approaching that, they are building their own kind of internal regulations to make sure that they are compliant with the laws that would make sure that this co-employment issue doesn't exist.
Yeah, a very interesting one. Once you cross national borders for work, it gets national, and in the U.S., right? Of course, when you're across state borders, different as well. So that's a great answer to that. And then speaking of that, we had another question about global footprint, and somebody was asking about, are you serving customers across the globe? I know a lot of your talent tends to be in Eastern Europe. Do you cover Asia Pacific? How have you been working with companies around the world?
Yes, we keep expanding our footprint. So currently we work with clients across the North America, Europe, but also branching out to Asia. Our supplied ecosystem consists of is spread across over 30 countries, and we do have first engagement in Asia, but not in Asia Pacific. So far we've gone as far as India, but looking forward to expand that in the future.
Right. Great. Okay. A question here about supporting the U.S. public sector. So this would be like, a government, state, local, national government, and how do you see any difference there in providing these types of services?
So we don't have any first-hand experience with the U.S. public sector. Often case, what we would do, we would actually partner with a company that is being cleared to serve a given industry that actually requires specific certifications. So we would be happy to partner with with the company that actually has exposure to the public sector. But as a company, we haven't had a chance to experience that just yet.
Right. Okay, and then the classic question here that we get all the time, particularly when you start to think about work in the cloud, is the whole issue of data security, protected intellectual property, PII. You probably know the definition of that, Prez. I'm not sure what that is, but tell us a little bit more about what you guys do around that.
So we follow kind of the established models that were long invented by the IT outsourcing industry. So depending on the client requirement, we can work on the client infrastructure, like physically, and in some of our engagements, actually the teams that are hired for the jobs actually work out of the client premises. That was prior COVID. But often we can also isolate that infrastructure, using VPNs or by delivering the hardware to the individuals from the client. When it comes to IP transfer, all of that IP transfer is managed, of course, through Talent Alpha and the legal constructs that we have in place. So I would say there's no difference between what we do and how the bigger IT outsourcing industry is solving that problem today.
Very good. All right. Well, that looks like all the questions that we have. Wanted to say thank you again to everyone for participating. Pres Berendt, thanks again for sharing all your insights. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. My pleasure.